The morning briefing room smelled of burnt coffee and skepticism as Sergeant Kira Valdez adjusted the scope on her rifle for the third time. Around the metal table, 8 Marines shifted in their chairs, their eyes dancing between the mission maps and the woman who would be their designated marksman for Operation Silent Thunder. The overhead fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across weathered faces, each one telling stories of desert combat and brotherhood forged in fire. Captain Hayes spread the aerial photographs across the scarred table surface, his thick fingers tracing enemy positions along the ridgeline. "The target compound sits here," he announced, tapping a cluster of buildings nestled between rocky outcroppings. "Intelligence suggests 20 to 30 hostiles, well-armed and expecting company. We go in fast, extract the asset, and disappear before they know what hit them." Corporal Brennan leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of 3 tours in Afghanistan. "What about Overwatch, sir? We need someone covering our 6 when things get messy." His gaze flicked toward Kira, then away just as quickly, the doubt written in the tight lines around his eyes. "Valdez has the best scores on the range," Hayes replied, though his tone suggested he was reading from a report rather than speaking from conviction. "She will provide cover from a north ridge while the rest of you breach the compound." The mission timeline was aggressive: insertion at 0400, extraction by 0630, all before the desert heat could betray their position to enemy thermal scopes. Staff Sergeant Morrison scratched his graying beard, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "Sir, no disrespect to Valdez, but this is a heavy lift. Maybe we should consider Rodriguez for Overwatch. He has more field experience in this terrain." The unspoken words hung in the air like smoke from a spent cartridge. "She is untested. She is a liability. She does not belong." Before we dive deeper into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you have witnessed similar situations where someone was underestimated based on assumptions rather than ability. These moments of doubt often reveal more about the doubters than the doubted. Kira felt the familiar knot form in her stomach, the same sensation she had experienced countless times throughout her military career. The weight of proving herself pressed against her shoulders like a heavy pack during a 20-mile march. She had outshot every man in this room during qualification week, placing shots within a 2-inch group at 600 yards while they struggled to hit center mass. Yet here they sat, questioning her readiness based on factors that had nothing to do with her trigger finger or tactical awareness. "I appreciate the concern," she said, her voice steady despite the tension coiling in her chest. "But my record speaks for itself. 47 confirmed targets during my previous deployment, 0 mission failures, and a reputation for bringing everyone home alive." The statistics rolled off her tongue like a prayer she had recited too many times, each number a small victory against the tide of assumption that threatened to drown her credibility. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of air conditioning struggling against the desert heat outside. Hayes studied her face, searching for cracks in her confidence, for any sign that the pressure might compromise the mission. Finding none, he nodded slowly and returned his attention to the maps. "Rodriguez will take point on the breach team," Hayes continued. "Morrison and Thompson provide flanking support, while Jenkins handles communications and extraction coordination. Valdez maintains Overwatch from grid reference November 7, providing cover fire and threat assessment for the entire operation." The plan was solid, built on proven tactics, and executed by Marines who understood their roles. Yet beneath the surface, currents of doubt continued to swirl. As the briefing concluded and the men filed out to prepare their gear, Kira remained seated, studying the topographical map with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The ridgeline where she would position herself was isolated, nearly 300 yards from the nearest friendly position. If something went wrong, if the enemy flanked the main team, or if extraction became compromised, she would be alone in hostile territory with nothing but her rifle and her training to keep her alive. The irony was not lost on her that the same isolation that questioned her ability to handle might become her greatest advantage. In the solitude of the ridge, there would be no doubting voices, No questioning glances. No need to prove herself to anyone except the enemy combatants who would soon find themselves in her crosshairs. The desert had a way of stripping away everything except the essential truth of survival. And Kira Valdez had been surviving in one form or another since the day she first picked up a rifle. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around the convoy like a funeral shroud as 3 Humvees cut through the desert terrain toward the insertion point. Kira sat in the rear vehicle, her modified M24 sniper rifle secure between her knees, the familiar weight of her equipment bringing comfort in the uncertainty that lay ahead. The vehicle rocked and swayed over the uneven ground, each bump testing the secure mounting of her night vision scope and the careful arrangement of her ammunition pouches. "Driver knows his business," Corporal Brennan muttered from the seat beside her, his voice barely audible over the engine noise and the creak of suspension springs. "Been running these routes for 6 months without incident." His tone carried the grudging respect of a soldier acknowledging professional competence, though his sideways glances suggested his assessment of her remained incomplete. Through the armored glass, the landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, a moonlit wasteland of rocks and scattered vegetation that offered both concealment and exposure, depending on how skillfully it was navigated. Kira studied the terrain features, mentally cataloging potential firing positions, escape routes, and dead zones where enemy movement might go undetected. Her mind operated like a tactical computer, processing variables and contingencies with the systematic precision that had kept her alive through 2 previous deployments. The radio crackled to life as Captain Hayes coordinated final approach vectors with the other vehicles. "Bravo team reports negative contact. All systems green for insertion. Charlie team maintaining overwatch on the southern approach. Weather conditions remain optimal with minimal wind, drift affecting long-range accuracy." The military precision of the communication belied the complexity of emotions flowing beneath the surface, the mixture of anticipation and anxiety that preceded every dangerous mission. Rodriguez leaned forward from his position near the vehicle commander, his bulk blocking out the dim light from the instrument panel. "Valdez, when we hit the compound, you need to be ready for anything. These targets are not training dummies. They shoot back, they move unpredictably, and they will try to flank your position if they identify your firing signature." His words carried the weight of hard-earned experience, but also an underlying assumption that she needed guidance that the male Marines would instinctively understand. The patronizing tone rankled against her professional pride, but Kira kept her response measured and factual. "My last deployment included 47 confirmed eliminations across varying terrain and weather conditions. Enemy counter-sniper tactics, flanking maneuvers, and suppression fire are all factored into my positioning strategy and engagement protocols." She spoke with the calm authority of someone who had faced these challenges before and emerged victorious. Yet she could feel the skepticism radiating from her teammates like heat from desert stones. Staff Sergeant Morrison's voice cut through the tension from the front passenger seat. "The difference is that those were different conditions, different enemy, different stakes. This operation depends on precise coordination and split-second timing. One missed shot, one moment of hesitation, and the entire team pays the price." His words hung in the air like an accusation, waiting to be proven or disproven by the events that lay ahead. The convoy slowed as they approached the designated drop-off coordinates, 3 miles from the target compound across terrain that would challenge even experienced desert fighters. Kira methodically checked her equipment one final time, ensuring that every piece of gear was secured and accessible. Her rifle scope was zeroed for the expected engagement distances, her range cards updated for the specific atmospheric conditions, and her ammunition selected for optimal performance against both personnel and light vehicle targets. As the vehicles came to a stop, the Marines began their final preparations with the ritualistic efficiency of professionals who understood that survival often depended on attention to seemingly minor details. Night vision devices were activated and tested, communication frequencies verified, and individual equipment loads redistributed to optimize mobility and firepower. The desert air was cool against exposed skin, carrying the scent of sage and dust that would soon be mingled with cordite and blood. Captain Hayes gathered the team around a portable GPS unit. The green glow of the screen illuminating faces painted with camouflage that transformed them into creatures of shadow and purpose. Final approach routes confirmed. Extraction Point Alpha remains active, with Bravo and Charlie as contingency positions. Valdez, your overwatch position is here, with primary fields of fire covering the compound entrance and western escape routes. The plan was methodical and professional, yet Kira could sense the unspoken reservations that lingered beneath the tactical briefing. The team moved out across the desert floor with practiced stealth, their boots finding purchase on loose rock and hard-pan earth that threatened to betray their approach with every step. Kira separated from the main group after the first kilometer, ascending toward her designated ridge position through terrain that grew increasingly treacherous in the darkness. Each step carried her further from the support and protection of her teammates, into the isolation that would either prove her worth or expose her limitations under the harsh judgment of combat. The withdrawal began as a textbook retrograde movement, with each Marine maintaining spacing and cover while Rodriguez called out waypoints through the team radio frequency. Kira tracked their progress through her scope, watching for any sign that the enemy forces had detected the aborted mission or were moving to intercept the retreating team. The compound guards remained at normal alert levels, but the eastern ambush position showed increased activity as more fighters arrived with additional equipment. Hammer 6, this is Overwatch 1. Your route back to Extraction Point Alpha is compromised. I count at least 15 hostiles moving to blocking positions along your primary withdrawal corridor. Recommend immediate diversion to Extraction Point Bravo or Charlie to avoid contact. Her voice remained steady despite the growing realization that the situation was spiraling beyond anyone's ability to control through standard tactical procedures. Captain Hayes acknowledged her report with growing frustration evident in his transmission. Copy Overwatch 1. Be advised, Extraction Point Bravo is 8 kilometers through open terrain. Charlie is even further and crosses multiple enemy patrol routes. We need to find another option or fight our way through the blocking positions. The mathematics of survival were becoming increasingly stark as their options narrowed with each passing minute. Through her scope, Kira could see the enemy fighters establishing what appeared to be a coordinated sweep pattern designed to drive the Marines into predetermined killing zones. These were not random insurgents reacting to an unexpected threat. They were organized combatants executing a well-rehearsed counterinfiltration plan that suggested prior knowledge of American tactics and likely infiltration routes. The mission had been compromised before it even began. The first shots echoed across the desert as the breach team made contact with an enemy patrol they could not avoid. Muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness like deadly fireflies as automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple directions. Through her radio, she could hear Rodriguez calling for immediate fire support, while Morrison coordinated movement to whatever cover the team could find in the sparse desert terrain. Overwatch 1, this is Hammer 6. We're taking heavy contact from multiple directions. Can you identify enemy positions and provide covering fire to suppress their advance? We are pinned down approximately 600 meters southwest of the compound, with limited cover and wounded personnel. The calm professionalism in Hayes' voice could not entirely mask the desperation of their tactical situation. Kira immediately shifted her scope toward the gunfire, identifying muzzle flashes and movement patterns among the enemy positions. Her first shot took down a fighter who was attempting to maneuver around the Marines' left flank, the 7.62mm round dropping him instantly at a range of 540 meters. She worked the bolt action smoothly and acquired her next target, a machine gunner who was setting up to deliver devastating fire against her trapped teammates. Her second and third shots eliminated the machine gun crew, but more enemy fighters were converging on the Marines' position from directions that put them beyond her effective fields of fire. The rocky terrain that provided her excellent concealment also limited her ability to engage targets approaching from the south and east, creating dead zones where enemy forces could maneuver without fear of a rifle. Hammer 6, this is Overwatch 1. I have eliminated multiple targets, but cannot cover all your approaches from this position. You need to break contact and move toward my location where I can provide better support. The ridge line offers better defensive positions than your current location. Her tactical assessment was correct, but it required the team to move through open ground under enemy fire, a maneuver that would likely result in casualties. The response came not from Hayes, but from Staff Sergeant Morrison, his voice strained with pain and exhaustion. Overwatch 1. We have 2 Marines down and cannot move them through open terrain under fire. We need immediate extraction at this location or we're going to lose people. The enemy has us surrounded and they're bringing up heavier weapons. The situation had deteriorated from tactical withdrawal to survival crisis in less than 10 minutes. Through her scope, Kira could see the enemy forces massing for what appeared to be a final assault on the Marines' position. Vehicle headlights were approaching from the compound, likely carrying reinforcements and crew-served weapons that would make the Americans' position untenable. The mathematics of combat were inexorable. Her teammates were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in terrain that offered minimal defensive advantages. The radio transmission that changed everything came in Hayes' voice, but the words carried a weight that transcended military protocol. All stations, this is Hammer 6. We are implementing emergency extraction protocol. Immediate helicopter extraction requested at our current position. Overwatch 1. Maintain your position and provide what support you can, but do not compromise your own position. We cannot afford to lose everyone. The implications hit her like a physical blow. Emergency extraction protocol meant the helicopters would come in fast and extract whoever they could reach, but her position on the ridge was too far from the landing zone. The team would be extracted while she remained behind, alone in hostile territory with enemy forces who would soon be searching for the sniper who had been eliminating their comrades with deadly precision. They were not abandoning her through cowardice or malice, but through the harsh mathematics of military necessity that sometimes demanded terrible choices for mission survival. The sound of rotors cutting through the night air brought both hope and finality as 2 Black Hawk helicopters approached the Marines' position at high speed and low altitude. Kira watched through her scope as the aircraft executed a tactical insertion that was both professionally executed and heartbreakingly brief. The helicopters touched down for less than 60 seconds, just long enough for her teammates to load their wounded and scramble aboard before lifting off into the darkness that would carry them to safety. Through her radio earpiece, she heard Captain Hayes' final transmission to her position. Overwatch 1. We're clear of the landing zone. Enemy forces are moving toward your position from multiple directions. You need to displace immediately and evade to the secondary extraction point. We will return for you as soon as we can coordinate additional assets. His words carried the weight of command decisions that haunted leaders long after the battles ended. The radio went silent as the helicopters disappeared over the horizon, leaving behind only the distant sound of enemy vehicles and shouted commands in Arabic as search teams began converging on her ridge position. Kira knew that her muzzle flashes had given away her approximate location, and experienced fighters will be able to track back her firing positions with deadly accuracy. She had perhaps 15 minutes before the first enemy patrols reached her position. Moving with practiced stealth, she began dismantling her firing position and preparing for immediate displacement. Her rifle was broken down and secured in its carrying configuration, while essential equipment was redistributed for maximum mobility. Non-critical gear was abandoned in favor of ammunition, water, and medical supplies that would determine her survival chances during the extended evasion that lay ahead. Every item had to justify its weight against its potential value in keeping her alive. The secondary extraction point was 12 kilometers to the southeast, across terrain that included open desert, rocky ridges, and at least 2 known enemy patrol routes. Under normal circumstances, The movement would require 6 hours of careful navigation to avoid detection. With hostile forces actively searching for her, the timeline became far more complex and dangerous. She would need to move fast enough to stay ahead of the search teams, while remaining invisible to thermal imaging and electronic surveillance. Her first priority was creating distance between herself and the compromised position before enemy forces could establish a search perimeter. Moving down the backside of the ridge, she used the terrain features to mask her movement while maintaining situational awareness for approaching patrols. The rocky ground provided good concealment, but made silent movement challenging, forcing her to balance speed against noise discipline in an equation that could mean the difference between escape and capture. 20 minutes after the helicopter extraction, she heard the first enemy patrol reach her former firing position. Angry voices echoed off the rock walls as the fighters discovered her abandoned equipment and began coordinating search patterns that would systematically cover the surrounding area. She estimated at least 30 combatants were involved in the search, organized into teams with vehicles, communications, and night vision capabilities that would make evasion increasingly difficult as the night progressed. The terrain ahead offered a series of wadis and dry creek beds that could provide concealed movement corridors, but these same features would be obvious choices to experienced trackers. She decided to take a calculated risk by moving through more open ground that would be faster but more exposed, gambling that speed and unpredictability would serve her better than obvious concealment that enemy forces would systematically search. Her training in survival, evasion, resistance, and escape protocols had prepared her for this scenario, but the reality of being alone in hostile territory with limited resources brought psychological pressures that no amount of classroom instruction could fully simulate. Every shadow could hide an enemy fighter, every sound could signal approaching danger, and every decision carried consequences that would ripple through the remaining hours of darkness and into the daylight that would make concealment far more challenging. Moving through a particularly exposed section of desert floor, she heard the distinctive sound of tracked vehicles approaching from the north. Through her night vision, she could see the thermal signature of what appeared to be an armored personnel carrier equipped with searchlights and probably carrying a squad of heavily armed fighters. The vehicle was moving in a search pattern that would bring it directly across her intended route within the next 10 minutes. She had two choices: hide in place and hope the vehicle passed without detecting her, or make an immediate course change that would add hours to her movement, but avoid the mobile search team. The decision required weighing immediate risk against long-term survival chances, factoring in her physical condition, remaining water supply, and the likelihood that daybreak would bring additional search assets, including aircraft that would make movement in open terrain virtually impossible. The sound of the vehicle grew closer as she made her decision, committing to a route change that would take her through rougher terrain but away from the most obvious search corridors. Behind her, additional vehicles were arriving at her former position, their headlights creating a constellation of hostile activity that was expanding outward like ripple from stone thrown into still water. The hunt for the American sniper who had killed their comrades was intensifying with resources and determination that would test every skill she had acquired during her military career. The first 12 hours alone transformed the desert from a tactical environment into a living adversary that tested every aspect of her survival training. Kira had covered nearly 8 kilometers through terrain that shifted from rocky ridges to soft sand washes, each step calculated to minimize her signature while maintaining progress toward the distant extraction point. Behind her, the enemy search pattern had evolved from random sweeps to systematic grid searches that demonstrated professional tracking capabilities she had underestimated. Dawn brought new challenges as the thermal advantage of darkness gave way to visual exposure that made every piece of available cover precious beyond measure. She had found shelter in a cluster of boulders that provided overhead concealment from aircraft while offering multiple escape routes if ground forces discovered her position. The rocky shelter was cramped and uncomfortable, but it offered the concealment necessary to survive the daylight hours when movement would become virtually impossible. Through a carefully positioned gap in the rocks, she could observe the search activity continuing in the distance. At least 3 vehicles were maintaining patrol patterns along the major wadis, while foot patrols worked through the more difficult terrain where vehicles could not operate effectively. The enemy forces were demonstrating patience and methodology that suggested they understood they were hunting a trained professional who would not make obvious mistakes that would lead to quick capture. Her water situation was becoming critical as the desert heat began building toward the crushing intensity that would characterize the daylight hours. She had started with 4 liters, consumed 1 during the night movement, and needed to ration the remainder to last until the next opportunity for resupply or extraction. In this environment, water was not just sustenance but survival itself, and every sip had to be weighed against future needs that could not be predicted or guaranteed. The sound of helicopters approaching from the east brought both hope and danger as she recognized the distinctive rotor signature of American aircraft. Through her concealed observation position, she could see 2 Apache attack helicopters conducting what appeared to be a search and rescue sweep along the planned extraction corridor. The aircraft were following standard protocols for recovering isolated personnel, but their presence also confirmed to enemy forces that an American operator was still at large in the area. Her survival radio remained silent on the designated frequencies, suggesting either that the rescue aircraft were not yet in the correct search area or that enemy electronic warfare capabilities were interfering with communications. She made the tactical decision to maintain radio silence rather than risk exposing her position to enemy direction-finding equipment that might be more sophisticated than intelligence estimates had suggested. The discipline required to remain hidden while friendly forces searched overhead tested every aspect of her training and self-control. As the morning progressed, the enemy search pattern began to shift in a way that demonstrated they were receiving information from sources beyond simple visual tracking. Vehicle movements became more focused, patrol routes adjusted to cover specific terrain features, and the overall search area began contracting in a manner that suggested electronic intelligence or human intelligence sources were providing targeting information. She realized that her situation was more complex than simple evasion from a reactive enemy force. The heat became a physical presence that pressed against her body like a living thing, sapping moisture through perspiration that she could not afford to lose, while simultaneously degrading her mental acuity in ways that could prove fatal during critical decision-making moments. Desert survival required constant attention to thermal regulation, hydration management, and energy conservation that became more challenging as physical stress accumulated over extended periods of time. Her first opportunity for tactical action came when a foreman enemy patrol approached her hiding position while conducting a systematic search of the boulder field. The fighters moved with reasonable tactical discipline, but made the critical error of bunching together while negotiating difficult terrain, presenting a target opportunity that her training and instincts demanded she exploit. From her concealed position, she could eliminate all 4 targets before they could react or call for support. The decision required balancing immediate tactical advantage against strategic survival considerations. Eliminating the patrol would remove an immediate threat and potentially provide access to enemy equipment and supplies, but it would also confirm her location to other search teams and likely trigger an intensive response that would make further evasion far more difficult. The choice represented the kind of split-second tactical judgment that separated successful operators from casualties. She chose aggression over concealment, reasoning that her position would eventually be discovered regardless, and that eliminating immediate threats while acquiring enemy resources offered better long-term survival prospects than passive hiding. Her first shot dropped the patrol leader at a range of 80 meters, the suppressed rifle producing minimal noise signature while delivering devastating terminal effects. The remaining 3 fighters had less than 2 seconds to process what had happened before follow-up shots eliminated them with clinical precision. Moving quickly to the elimination site, she conducted a rapid battlefield intelligence collection that revealed disturbing information about the scope and organization of the enemy forces hunting her. The fighters carried sophisticated communication equipment, detailed topographical maps, marked with search sectors, and photographic intelligence that included images of American personnel that should not have been available to random insurgent groups. The level of preparation and coordination suggested an adversary far more capable than initial intelligence assessments had indicated. Among the equipment she acquired were additional water supplies, ammunition compatible with captured weapons, and most importantly, a tactical radio tuned to enemy command frequencies that would allow her to monitor their communications and potentially gain advance warning of search activities. The intelligence windfall transformed her tactical situation from reactive evasion to proactive engagement, shifting the psychological balance from hunted to hunter in ways that would prove decisive in the hours ahead. The captured radio crackled with enemy communications that revealed the full scope of the operation designed to capture or eliminate her. As Kira monitored the Arabic transmissions, her language training allowed her to understand that at least 60 fighters were involved in the search, organized into coordinated teams with specific sectors and overlapping fields of responsibility. The enemy commander was methodical and patient, treating the hunt as a complex military operation rather than a simple manhunt. From her new position in a dried riverbed 2 kilometers from the eliminated patrol, she could observe multiple enemy vehicles moving in patterns that demonstrated sophisticated command and control capabilities. The fighters were not random insurgents, but organized combatants with military training, proper equipment, and communication systems that allowed coordinated operations across a wide area of desert terrain. Their discipline and tactical competence explained why the original mission had been so thoroughly compromised. The radio intercepts revealed that her elimination of the Foreman patrol had triggered an immediate tactical adjustment in the enemy search pattern. Additional forces were being moved to cordon off potential escape routes, while specialized tracking teams were being deployed to follow her trail from the contact site. She estimated she had perhaps 4 hours before the systematic search reached her current position, forcing another movement under increasingly difficult circumstances. Her tactical situation improved dramatically when she observed a 2-man enemy reconnaissance team establishing an observation post on a ridge that dominated the surrounding terrain. The position offered excellent fields of view, but was isolated from supporting forces, making it vulnerable to attack by a skilled operator with proper planning and execution. More importantly, the observation post contained communication equipment that would allow direct monitoring of enemy command frequencies and potentially provide access to their tactical coordination network. The approach to the observation post required movement across 800 meters of open ground during daylight hours when thermal signatures and visual exposure created maximum vulnerability to detection. She planned a route that utilized every piece of available concealment, while timing her movement to coincide with periods when other enemy forces were focused on different search sectors. The infiltration demanded the kind of patient fieldcraft that separated elite operators from conventional soldiers. Moving in short bounds between covered positions, she used the desert terrain features to mask her approach while maintaining constant situational awareness for other enemy elements that might compromise her movement. Each movement required careful observation, precise timing, and absolute silence to avoid detection by the observation post or other enemy forces operating in the area. The psychological pressure of exposure combined with physical exhaustion to create conditions that tested every aspect of her training and mental discipline. The elimination of the observation post required split-second timing and flawless execution, since any delay would allow the enemy fighters to alert other forces and coordinate a response that would trap her in an exposed position. Her approach brought her to within 50 meters of the target before the sentries detected her presence, but by then it was too late for them to react effectively. Her first shot eliminated the radio operator, while her second shot dropped his partner before he could reach his weapon. The intelligence harvest from the observation post exceeded her most optimistic expectations. Detailed tactical maps showed the complete enemy search pattern. Communication logs revealed coordination with other hostile elements. And most importantly, she discovered that the enemy forces had been expecting American operations in this area for several weeks. The level of preparation and the sophistication of their counterintelligence suggested involvement by foreign military advisors or intelligence services. Among the captured equipment was a high-powered rifle with telescopic sight that significantly enhanced her engagement capabilities against targets at extended range. The weapon was professionally maintained and zeroed, suggesting it belonged to an enemy sniper who understood the importance of precision marksmanship in desert operations. Combined with her existing equipment, she now possessed the firepower and surveillance capabilities necessary to conduct sustained operations against superior numbers. The radio communications intercepts revealed that the enemy commander was becoming increasingly frustrated with the failure to locate and eliminate the American operator who had now killed 6 of his fighters without sustaining casualties or revealing her position. Additional reinforcements were being requested from other areas, indicating that the search operation was expanding beyond the original parameters and consuming resources that the enemy had not planned to commit to a single isolated target. Her tactical assessment indicated that the enemy forces were psychologically unprepared for sustained combat against a skilled opponent who could strike without warning and disappear before retaliation was possible. The fighters were accustomed to facing conventional forces or poorly trained insurgents, not a professional operator with advanced training and the motivation that came from fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. She decided to exploit this psychological vulnerability through a campaign of precision strikes designed to erode enemy morale while gathering intelligence. The afternoon heat created thermal conditions that would interfere with enemy observation equipment while providing natural concealment for her own movements. She began planning a series of engagements designed to eliminate key enemy personnel while avoiding decisive combat that would reveal her position or exhaust her limited ammunition supplies. Each engagement would be carefully planned to maximize tactical impact while maintaining the mobility necessary for continued operations. As evening approached, she monitored enemy communications that revealed growing anxiety among the search teams and increasing pressure from their commander to produce results. The psychological momentum was beginning to shift in her favor as the hunters began to understand they were facing an adversary far more dangerous than they had anticipated. The desert that had initially seemed like her enemy was becoming her ally as she learned to use its harsh conditions against opponents who lacked her training and determination. The second night began with Kira holding every tactical advantage except numbers as she initiated a systematic campaign designed to demoralize and fragment the enemy forces hunting her. From her concealed position overlooking a major vehicle checkpoint, she observed the nervous behavior of fighters who had begun to understand they were facing an adversary capable of striking without warning from distances that rendered their conventional tactics ineffective. Her first target was a vehicle commander who had been coordinating search patterns through radio communications she had been monitoring throughout the afternoon. The elimination shot at 460 meters dropped him instantly while he stood beside his vehicle, creating immediate chaos among his subordinates who scrambled for cover without understanding the direction or nature of the threat. The psychological impact exceeded the tactical value as surviving fighters began questioning their safety even in positions they had considered secure. Moving immediately after the shot to avoid counter-sniper response, she relocated to a position that offered observation of the enemy reaction while remaining beyond the effective range of their weapons. Through the captured night vision equipment, she could observe the panic and confusion that followed her attack as fighters abandoned coordinated search patterns in favor of defensive positions that prioritized their own safety over mission accomplishment. The enemy radio communications revealed the growing impact of her psychological warfare campaign as unit commanders reported increasing reluctance among their fighters to operate in exposed positions or to conduct aggressive patrols in areas where the American sniper might be positioned. Morale was deteriorating as casualty reports accumulated without corresponding progress in locating or neutralizing the threat that continued to strike with impunity. Her second engagement of the evening targeted a 3-vehicle convoy that was moving reinforcements to support the search operation. From an elevated position that offered multiple escape routes, She engaged the lead vehicle with precision shots that eliminated the driver and front passenger, causing the convoy to halt in a vulnerable position on open ground. Follow-up shots disabled the radio operators in the remaining vehicles, cutting off their communications and isolating them from support. The convoy engagement demonstrated the multiplicative effect of precision marksmanship against opponents who lacked proper training in counter-sniper tactics. Instead of dispersing and seeking cover, the surviving fighters bunched together behind their vehicles in a formation that made them easier targets for her elevated position. Within minutes, she had eliminated 7 additional enemy combatants while expending only 9 rounds of ammunition, a tactical efficiency that would be impossible against properly trained opponents. Her movement between engagement positions required navigation through increasingly difficult terrain as enemy forces attempted to establish security cordons around areas where she had previously operated. The rocky desert provided excellent concealment for a skilled operator, but also created physical challenges that accumulated over time as fatigue and dehydration began to affect her performance. Every step had to be calculated to conserve energy while maintaining the mobility necessary for continued operations. The captured enemy communications revealed that their commander was requesting immediate air support to assist in locating and engaging the American operator who had now eliminated 13 fighters without sustaining casualties or being positively identified. The request was being processed through channels that would likely bring helicopter gunships or surveillance aircraft to the area within hours, fundamentally changing the tactical environment in ways that would challenge her ability to continue operations. Her third engagement focused on eliminating the enemy command element that was coordinating the overall search operation from a protected position near the original compound. The approach required movement through terrain that had been under enemy observation throughout the day, but darkness and her knowledge of their patrol patterns allowed her to reach a firing position within 300 meters of the command post. The command post elimination required precise shot placement to avoid damaging communication equipment that contained intelligence value while ensuring that key personnel were neutralized before they could coordinate a response. Her first shot eliminated the senior commander, while her second shot disabled his deputy, creating a leadership vacuum that would disrupt enemy operations for hours while subordinate commanders attempted to assume control and coordinate activities they did not fully understand. The intelligence recovered from the command post revealed the full scope of the enemy operation and confirmed her growing suspicion that foreign military advisors were providing tactical guidance and sophisticated equipment to local fighters. Documents and communication logs indicated coordination with other hostile elements across a much wider area than she had originally estimated, suggesting that her survival and eventual extraction would require defeating or evading a network of opponents rather than a single isolated group. Among the captured equipment were detailed maps showing planned search patterns for the following day, communication frequencies for coordination with air support elements, and most importantly, the location of a logistics base where additional ammunition and supplies were being staged to support the extended operation. The intelligence windfall provided opportunities for tactical strikes that could significantly degrade enemy capabilities while potentially providing resources necessary for her continued survival. As the night progressed, she monitored enemy communications that revealed growing frustration and fear among the remaining search teams. Reports of contact with the American sniper had been exaggerated through repetition until some units believed they were facing multiple opponents with capabilities that bordered on supernatural. The psychological effect was beginning to fragment their coordination as individual commanders prioritized unit survival over mission accomplishment. Her tactical assessment indicated that the enemy forces were approaching a breaking point where continued casualties without corresponding success would cause a collapse in morale that might provide opportunities for decisive action. However, the anticipated arrival of air support would require significant changes in her operational approach, forcing her to balance continued offensive operations against the need to remain concealed from airborne surveillance systems that would be far more difficult to evade than ground-based opponents. The sound of approaching aircraft at dawn marked the beginning of a new phase in the deadly game as two enemy helicopters appeared on the horizon, their distinctive rotor signatures indicating Soviet-built attack aircraft that would bring sophisticated sensors and heavy weapons to bear against her position. Kira had anticipated this escalation and spent the pre-dawn hours preparing defensive positions that would provide protection from aerial observation while maintaining the mobility necessary to continue her campaign against the demoralized ground forces. From her concealed position in a deep wadi that offered overhead cover from thermal imaging, she monitored enemy radio communications that revealed the psychological impact of her nighttime operations had exceeded even her most optimistic expectations. Ground commanders were reporting widespread reluctance among their fighters to conduct patrols or maintain exposed positions, with some units refusing direct orders to enter areas where the American sniper had previously operated. The helicopter crews were experiencing their own difficulties as they attempted to locate a target who understood how to use terrain and timing to remain invisible to airborne surveillance systems. Their search patterns were predictable and methodical, characteristics that she could exploit through careful positioning and movement timing. The aircraft were powerful but not invincible, and their crews lacked experience in hunting skilled ground operators who understood their capabilities and limitations. Her morning engagement targeted an enemy resupply convoy that was attempting to deliver ammunition and reinforcements to the scattered search teams. The convoy offered multiple high-value targets, including fuel trucks, ammunition vehicles, and command personnel who were essential to maintaining the enemy operation. From a firing position that provided concealment from aerial observation, she began systematic destruction of the convoy elements with precision shots that maximized tactical damage while conserving her limited ammunition. The first fuel truck exploded in a massive fireball that sent black smoke billowing into the morning sky, creating a visual signature that would draw helicopter attention while simultaneously providing concealment for her continued operations. Her follow-up shots eliminated the convoy commander and several key personnel before the surviving elements could organize an effective response or call for immediate air support to suppress her position. Moving immediately after the engagement to avoid the helicopter response, she used the smoke and confusion to mask her displacement to a position that offered observation of the enemy reaction while remaining beyond the effective range of their weapons. The convoy destruction had eliminated resources that would have sustained enemy operations for several days, forcing their commander to make difficult decisions about continuing the search with degraded capabilities. The helicopter crews eventually located the burning convoy and began systematic searches of the surrounding terrain using thermal imaging and visual reconnaissance that demonstrated professional competence, but also predictable patterns that she could anticipate and exploit. Their search methods were thorough but time-consuming, creating windows of opportunity for movement and positioning that a skilled operator could use to maintain tactical initiative. Her afternoon operations focused on eliminating the enemy logistics base that she had identified through captured intelligence, a facility that contained ammunition, fuel, communications equipment, and personnel essential to sustaining the search operation. The base was defended by approximately 15 fighters positioned in hardened positions, but their defensive preparations were designed to repel conventional assault rather than precision sniper attacks from unexpected directions. The approach to the logistics base required movement through terrain that was under intermittent aerial surveillance, forcing her to time her advance during periods when the helicopters were conducting searches in other sectors. Her route utilized natural concealment features while avoiding obvious approach corridors that enemy ground forces might have under observation. The infiltration demanded patience and precise timing that tested her ability to remain motionless for extended periods while aircraft passed overhead. The base elimination began with precision shots against sentries who were positioned to provide early warning of conventional attacks, but were vulnerable to sniper fire from elevated positions they had not considered during their defensive planning. Her systematic elimination of perimeter security allowed her to close within effective range of the main facility where critical supplies and personnel were concentrated in relatively vulnerable positions. The destruction of the ammunition storage area created secondary explosions that eliminated most of the base infrastructure, while providing dramatic confirmation to enemy forces throughout the area that their supposedly secure facility had been completely destroyed by the lone American operator they had been unable to locate or neutralize. The psychological impact of the destruction exceeded its tactical value as proof that nowhere in their area of operations was truly safe from her attacks. Her extraction from the logistics base required movement through terrain that was now under intensive aerial surveillance, as both helicopters converged on the explosion site. She used the smoke and debris from the destroyed facility to mask her initial movement, while planning a route that would take her to concealed positions before the aircraft could establish effective search patterns in her escape corridors. The enemy radio communications revealed complete demoralization among the remaining search teams as reports of the logistics-based destruction reached units that were already questioning their ability to survive continued operations against an adversary who seemed capable of striking any target with impunity. Several unit commanders were requesting permission to withdraw from the search area, citing unsustainable casualties and the ineffectiveness of their tactics against a skilled opponent. As evening approached, she monitored communications indicating that the enemy commander was considering abandoning the search operation entirely rather than accepting continued losses without prospect of success. The psychological warfare campaign had achieved results that exceeded conventional military effectiveness, demonstrating the multiplicative effect of precision operations against opponents who lacked proper training and leadership to counter unconventional tactics. Her tactical assessment indicated that she had reached a critical decision point where continued offensive operations might provide opportunities to completely defeat the enemy forces, but would also increase her exposure to risks that could prove fatal if her luck or skill failed at a critical moment. The approaching 72-hour mark since her abandonment represented a psychological milestone that would determine whether she had truly transformed from victim to victor in this deadly contest of skill and determination. The final day began with Kira monitoring enemy communications that revealed a desperate commander preparing to withdraw his remaining forces rather than continue accepting casualties that had reached 18 killed with 0 corresponding damage to the American operator who had turned his methodical search operation into a nightmare of precision strikes and psychological warfare. The radio intercepts indicated that only one more engagement might be necessary to completely break enemy morale and force their withdrawal from the area. From her concealed observation position overlooking the enemy staging area, she could see the visible signs of demoralization among the remaining fighters as they prepared defensive positions around their vehicles rather than conducting the aggressive patrols that had characterized their earlier operations. Their body language and movement patterns revealed troops who had lost confidence in their leadership and their mission, creating tactical opportunities that a skilled operator could exploit to achieve decisive results. The helicopter patrols had become less frequent as fuel and maintenance requirements strained enemy logistics capabilities that had been significantly degraded by her systematic destruction of supply convoys and storage facilities. When the aircraft did appear, their search patterns were hasty and superficial, suggesting that their crews were also affected by the psychological pressure of hunting an adversary who had demonstrated the ability to strike without warning from positions they could not detect or engage. Her opportunity for decisive action came when she observed the enemy commander attempting to personally rally his demoralized troops by moving between defensive positions in an armored vehicle that represented both his authority and his vulnerability. The vehicle offered protection from small arms fire, but not from precision rifle shots delivered by a skilled marksman with proper positioning and timing. Eliminating the commander would likely trigger the complete collapse she had been working to achieve. The engagement required positioning herself within 400 meters of heavily defended enemy positions while maintaining concealment from both ground observers and potential aerial surveillance. Her approach utilized a series of covered positions that allowed movement during periods when enemy attention was focused on other sectors, But the final firing position required exposure that would leave her vulnerable to immediate retaliation if her shot was not perfectly placed. Her single shot eliminated the enemy commander as he stood beside his vehicle, attempting to restore confidence among fighters who had lost faith in their ability to survive continued operations against the American sniper. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating as the remaining enemy forces witnessed their leader fall victim to the same invisible threat that had been systematically destroying their operation for the past 72 hours. The enemy reaction exceeded her most optimistic expectations as panic spread through their defensive positions like wildfire, consuming dry vegetation. Instead of maintaining discipline and attempting to locate her firing position, the surviving fighters began abandoning their positions and vehicles in a chaotic withdrawal that eliminated any semblance of military organization or tactical coherence. The systematic campaign of psychological warfare had achieved complete victory through the elimination of a single critical target. Moving immediately to avoid potential retaliation from helicopter crews who would likely respond to reports of their ground commander's elimination, she repositioned to an observation point that allowed monitoring of the enemy withdrawal while remaining concealed from aerial surveillance. The sight of enemy vehicles fleeing the area in disorder confirmed that her solo campaign had achieved strategic success that exceeded anything that might have been accomplished through conventional military operations. Her monitoring of enemy radio communications revealed the complete collapse of command authority as subordinate leaders argued about responsibility for the withdrawal, while simultaneously attempting to justify their failure to locate or neutralize a single American operator. The psychological damage would likely persist long after the immediate tactical situation was resolved, affecting enemy confidence and operational planning for future engagements in the region. The withdrawal created opportunities for intelligence collection as enemy forces abandoned equipment and documents in their haste to escape the area where so many of their comrades had been eliminated by an adversary they never saw and could not engage. The intelligence harvest included detailed information about enemy capabilities, organization, and coordination that would be valuable for future American operations in the region. As the last enemy vehicles disappeared over the horizon, she began planning her movement toward the designated extraction point where American forces would hopefully establish contact and coordinate her recovery from an operation that had transformed from mission failure into unprecedented tactical success. The 12-kilometer movement would require careful navigation through terrain that might still contain isolated enemy elements or observation posts. Her physical condition remained stable despite the extreme stress and limited resources that had characterized the past 72 hours of continuous operations. Military training and mental discipline had sustained her through challenges that would have overwhelmed less prepared individuals, demonstrating the value of rigorous preparation and professional competence in extreme circumstances that tested every aspect of human performance. The tactical assessment of her solo campaign revealed results that exceeded conventional measures of military effectiveness. 23 enemy combatants eliminated, major logistics facilities destroyed, command structure disrupted, and psychological impact that forced complete enemy withdrawal from the area. The statistical summary failed to capture the personal transformation from doubted team member to proven warrior that had occurred during 72 hours of solitary combat against overwhelming odds. As she began her final movement toward extraction, the desert that had initially seemed like her enemy now felt like familiar territory, where she had proven her capabilities and earned her place among the elite operators who could survive and prevail under the most challenging circumstances. The skeptical voices from a mission briefing seemed like echoes from another lifetime, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious through skill, determination, and the kind of courage that could not be taught but only discovered under the pressure of mortal combat. The movement toward the extraction point took her through terrain that bore the scars of her 3-day campaign, past burned-out vehicles and abandoned equipment that marked the locations where she had systematically destroyed enemy capabilities and morale through precision strikes that had transformed the desert into her personal battlefield. Each site represented a tactical victory that had contributed to the complete defeat of forces that had outnumbered her 20-1 while possessing superior equipment and local knowledge. Her survival radio finally crackled to life as American search and rescue aircraft established contact on the designated emergency frequency. The voice that came through her earpiece carried the professional calm of experienced aircrew who understood the complexities of combat recovery operations, but she could detect underlying tension that suggested her situation had received significant attention at higher command levels. Nighthawk 7-7, this is Overwatch 1. I am alive, mobile, and proceeding toward extraction point Alpha as planned. Be advised, I have been engaged in sustained combat operations for the past 72 hours with multiple enemy eliminations and significant intelligence collection. The area is currently clear of hostile forces following their withdrawal, but isolated elements may remain in the vicinity. Her transmission was matter-of-fact despite representing one of the most remarkable solo combat performances in military history. The response from the search and rescue coordinator revealed the scope of concern that her prolonged isolation had generated among American forces. Overwatch 1, this is Nighthawk 7-7. We show 23 hours past your scheduled extraction window. Entire theater has been mobilized for your recovery. Confirm your condition and ability to reach designated pickup zone within the next 4 hours. Multiple assets are standing by to provide immediate support if you are in contact or require medical assistance. Her physical condition remained adequate for continued operations despite the accumulated fatigue and stress that represented the inevitable cost of sustained combat without adequate rest or resupply. Military training had prepared her for extended operations under adverse conditions, but the reality of 3 days alone in hostile territory had tested limits that no amount of classroom instruction could fully simulate. The approaching extraction represented not just rescue, but validation of capabilities that had been questioned by those who should have known better. The intelligence she had collected during her solo operations would provide American forces with unprecedented insight into enemy capabilities, organization, and tactics that had been employed against isolated personnel. The documents, communication intercepts, and tactical observations represented an intelligence windfall that exceeded the value of the original mission objective and would contribute to future operations throughout the region. As she approached the final ridge before the extraction point, she encountered evidence of the massive search and rescue operation that had been mounted for her recovery. Aircraft contrails marked the positions of surveillance flights, while distant rotor noise indicated helicopters maintaining security patrols around the pickup zone. The scale of the response demonstrated the value that American forces placed on recovering their personnel, regardless of the resources required or risks involved. Her first visual contact with friendly forces came when she observed security teams establishing perimeter positions around the extraction landing zone. Through her scope, she could identify the distinctive equipment and movement patterns of special operations personnel who had been deployed to ensure her safe recovery. The sight of American uniforms and familiar tactical procedures brought a sense of relief that she had not allowed herself to acknowledge during the long hours of solitary combat. The approach to the extraction point required following specific protocols designed to prevent fratricide incidents when friendly forces were operating in areas where enemy contact was possible. Her movements had to be coordinated with security teams who were maintaining vigilant watch for any threats that might compromise the recovery operation. The irony was not lost on her that after 3 days of operating without support, she now required careful coordination to safely reach friendly positions. The extraction landing zone was a natural clearing that provided adequate space for helicopter operations while offering good defensive positions for security teams. American forces had established a professional perimeter with overlapping fields of fire and communication links that demonstrated the kind of tactical competence that should have prevented the original mission compromise. The contrast between current security measures and the planning failures that had led to her abandonment highlighted systemic issues that would require attention at higher command levels. Her radio contact with the ground security teams revealed the reputation her solo operations had generated among special operations personnel who understood the difficulty of what she had accomplished. The elimination of 23 enemy combatants, while operating alone with limited resources, represented performance that exceeded the capabilities of most military units, let alone individual operators working without support or backup. The final kilometer to the extraction point took her past positions where enemy forces had established search cordons that were now abandoned following their precipitous withdrawal from the area. The scattered equipment and defensive preparations provided additional evidence of the psychological impact her campaign had achieved through systematic elimination of key personnel and destruction of critical facilities. As she reached the security perimeter and made contact with friendly forces, the professional acknowledgement in their voices carried undertones of respect that had been notably absent during the original mission briefing. The transformation from doubted team member to accomplished warrior had been completed through 72 hours of combat that had tested every aspect of her training and personal character. The helicopter that would carry her to safety appeared on schedule, its distinctive rotor signature representing the end of an ordeal that had begun with abandonment and evolved into one of the most successful solo combat operations in recent military history. The aircraft approached with the precision and professionalism that characterized American military aviation, offering redemption for the planning failures that had created the crisis in the first place. Her extraction from the desert marked not just the end of a survival ordeal, but the beginning of recognition for capabilities that had been systematically underestimated by colleagues who confused assumptions with assessment. The statistical summary of her accomplishments would become part of military history, but the personal vindication represented something far more valuable than professional recognition. The helicopter touched down in a whirlwind of dust and rotor wash that seemed to sweep away the isolation of the past 72 hours as Kira sprinted across the landing zone toward the aircraft that represented safety, vindication, and the end of an ordeal that had transformed her from questioned team member into legendary operator. The crew chief who helped her aboard looked into eyes that had seen things few warriors ever experienced, the quiet confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious through skill and determination that could not be taught or simulated. As the aircraft lifted off and banked toward friendly territory, she could see the desert battlefield spread below like a tactical map marking the locations where she had systematically dismantled enemy operations through precision strikes that had achieved strategic results exceeding anything conventional forces might have accomplished with overwhelming advantages in numbers and equipment. Each impact site represented a small victory that had contributed to complete enemy defeat and withdrawal from territory they had controlled for months. The flight crew maintained professional quiet that spoke louder than words about the respect her accomplishments had generated throughout the special operations community. These were experienced combat veterans who understood the difference between routine operations and the kind of extraordinary performance that defined legendary careers. Their subdued acknowledgement carried more weight than formal recognition ceremonies or official commendations that would inevitably follow her return to higher headquarters. Captain Hayes was waiting at the landing zone when they touched down at the forward operating base, his face carrying the complex mixture of relief, guilt, and professional admiration that characterized commanders who have been forced to make impossible decisions under combat conditions. The tactical necessity that had forced him to abandon her during the emergency extraction had been vindicated by results that exceeded the most optimistic projections, but command decisions always carried personal costs that statistics could not measure. Sergeant Valdez, he said as she stepped off the helicopter, his voice carrying emotions that military protocol struggled to contain. We have been monitoring radio intercepts and overhead surveillance that suggest you engaged and eliminated 23 enemy combatants during sustained solo operations. Is that assessment accurate? The question was asked with the tone of someone who already knew the answer, but needed official confirmation for reports that would be scrutinized at the highest levels of military command. The statistical summary fails to capture the complete tactical picture. She replied with the quiet authority of someone who had proven herself under the ultimate test of combat. Enemy forces withdrew from the entire operational area following systematic destruction of their command structure, logistics capabilities, and morale. The psychological impact of precision operations exceeded conventional measures of military effectiveness and will likely influence their tactical planning for future engagements throughout the region. Her teammates gathered around with expressions that range from amazement to professional respect as they processed the reality of what she had accomplished during the time they had assumed she was either captured or killed. Rodriguez, Morrison, and the others who had questioned her capabilities during the original mission briefing now faced the undeniable evidence that their assumptions had been fundamentally wrong about both her abilities and her character. Staff Sergeant Morrison stepped forward, his graying beard unable to hide the smile that creased his weathered features. "Valdez, I owe you an apology and a debt that I can never properly repay. Your performance over the past 3 days has redefined what we thought was possible for individual operators under impossible conditions." The acknowledgement carried the weight of hard-earned respect from a career soldier who had seen enough combat to recognize exceptional performance when it was demonstrated under fire. The debriefing sessions that followed would dissect every aspect of her solo campaign for tactical lessons that could be incorporated into training programs and operational planning. Intelligence analysts would study her methods for engaging superior numbers while maintaining mobility and concealment that allowed sustained operations without resupply or support. Her techniques would become case studies in military schools and special operations training programs. As evening approached and the immediate requirements of operational reporting were completed, she found herself surrounded by colleagues who had been transformed from skeptical teammates into genuine admirers of capabilities that had been proven beyond any possible doubt. The quiet conversations and respectful acknowledgments carried more personal value than formal recognition that would come from higher command levels who had not shared the experience of working with someone they had initially underestimated. If this story moved you, drop a comment and let us know what resonated most with you. Maybe you have witnessed similar situations where someone proved their worth against impossible odds. Or perhaps you have experienced moments when others underestimated your capabilities based on assumptions rather than evidence. These stories of hidden strength revealed under pressure remind us that courage and competence often exist in forms that challenge our expectations and preconceptions. The transformation in how her teammates viewed her represented something far more valuable than professional recognition or career advancement. She had earned the kind of respect that could only come from demonstrating exceptional competence under conditions that tested every aspect of training, character, and personal courage. The doubting voices from the original mission briefing had been replaced by acknowledgement from warriors who understood the difference between theoretical capability and proven performance under fire. Her rifle, the same weapon that had been questioned as inadequate for the mission, now carried the distinction of having achieved one of the most remarkable individual combat records in recent military history. 23 confirmed eliminations, multiple facilities destroyed, enemy forces completely routed, and strategic objectives achieved through individual initiative and professional excellence that exceeded conventional measures of tactical effectiveness. The desert that had initially seemed like her enemy had become the proving ground where she demonstrated capabilities that transformed skepticism into respect and doubt into admiration. The harsh environment that had tested her survival skills had also revealed character traits that could not be measured through qualification scores or training evaluations, but only discovered under the pressure of actual combat against determined opponents. As she settled into quarters that represented safety and recognition after 72 hours of mortal danger, Kira Valdez reflected on a transformation that had begun with abandonment and evolved into vindication. The woman who had been left for dead had emerged as a warrior whose accomplishments would be remembered long after the specific details of the mission were forgotten. The desert had taken everything from her except the essential truth of who she was, and in return had given her something far more valuable than survival itself.